everyone, today I'm going to do the mid-year freakout tag. I know it's a little bit late because it's already August, but I figured since I just only have the booktube newbie tag up, that this would be a good way for you guys to get a general sense of what my reading tastes have been so far. Also, this is my second and a half time trying to film this thing. The first time ended up being about 3 hours. The second one was about 2 hours, and then I got sick, and then I had an entire weekend of like a loved one's engagement dinner, etc. So instead of trying to tackle the 2-hour video, I'm going to try and refilm this just so that it's more manageable this week while I edit it to get it out to you guys in time. So yeah, let's try to not chat too much, but basically it's gonna be the same categories as the mid-year freakout tag, except with a couple extra books. I started reading again last fall with ACOTAR, and then there was like this huge period of time where I couldn't finish a book. Like I'd read 20%, I'd like it, and then I'd just be like, no, I can't go on. So there wasn't too many books from 2023 that I could include, but there were some things that I do want to include. So it's just gonna be from then till now, and let's try to keep this as short as possible. So the first category is best book you've read so far in 2024. That has to go to an entire series, and that would be the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I read all like 5,100 whatever pages of this entire series back in March in 27 days. It had me in a complete chokehold. I'm sure everybody knows about this series already. I loved it so much that I also have the out of print UK white edition of the set, but I just don't want to take it out because it's so hard to put the books back into the box. If you're looking for an epic fantasy that focuses on, well, the protagonist is a female character, but overall a lot of strong female characters, and it still delves into a lot of the fantasy tropes that we really love, like finding yourself, finding your strength, finding what you're willing to fight and die for, you know, all those different things, fighting against evil, rebuilding the world to be a better place. You know, all these things are in this series. I personally found this series to fit my taste and my preferences far more than ACOTAR did. So if you like ACOTAR, I'm sure you end up trying this out anyways, but if you don't like ACOTAR, I would still say give this a try. It's very different. It's not a romantasy. It's definitely a epic fantasy. Another best book that I have to talk about is this one here. It's Five Broken Blades by Corland. And just look how gorgeous this first edition is. It's got these end papers, it's got this foiling. Like, this edition is just so stunning, and the story itself is so much fun. Think like Ocean's 11 vibes, where you have a bunch of very morally gray people who have to work together to pull off this big crime. Unlike Ocean's 11 though, obviously this has a fantasy setting, and it's not like people are trying to break into a casino to steal several billion dollars. They're trying to work together to assassinate a really evil king. But it's still got that vibe, like it's dark, but it's comedic, and everyone is likable, but not really a good person. Just so much fun. It's got a little bit of a nod to Korean culture as well. I was absolutely obsessed with this book while I read it, and I cannot wait for the next one to come out. And that one is also going to be super, super beautiful, so it's a plus there. I also wanted to point out a romance novel because I've noticed with myself that I'm quite picky with romance novels, and there's a lot of mid to fine, but there's not a lot that I absolutely love. And one that I absolutely adore is this one, and this is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I think Abby is great about balancing, writing a romance novel, so you know that you want the love story of two different people and how they end up being together forever, I guess, happily ever after. But she also has weaved in these real plot points about trauma and anxiety and mental health, and this book has all of them in there. You have two people with a very prominent wealth gap, the one who is in the upper echelons of society. She has a lot to deal with social pressures, with familial responsibility versus love. It's just a really great story where not only do you have a beautiful love story, but you also start thinking about all these different things. And she does her homework. She, in her acknowledgments and everything, in all of her books, she has therapists, doctors, specialists, sensitivity readers. She works hard to make sure that these books, while still romance novels, are also books that I feel like professionals in those fields and victims of the things that these characters go through would approve of. Like, they'd feel seen and they feel properly represented. So highly recommend Abby Jimenez's books, but I wanted to highlight this one. Category 2 is best sequel you've read so far in 2024. So quick shout out, of course, to Throne of Glass, because there was quite a few sequels after this one and I love them all, so had to point it out, but I'm not going to repeat what I had already talked about in category 1. So another best sequel I have to mention is Eldest by Christopher Paolini. I don't have a physical copy of that right now, but that is the second book in the Aragon series, the Inheritance Cycle. And in that particular sequel, Aragon is going through kind of like a learning phase, and he has to kind of learn from a mentor teacher figure. He makes Aragon think about a bunch of things, and in turn, you as the reader start thinking about these things, whether it's like morality and values and philosophy and you know, things are not always black and white, and they go into religion, they go into even going vegan, all these different things that really broaden Aragon's perspective, and in turn it broadens like the reader's perspective. I think it's just absolutely beautiful. I have finished all the books that Paolini has come out with so far for that series. I'd say that that one was my absolute favorite. And then I think it's no one's surprise that my best romance sequel is also an Abby Jimenez. I chose Just for the Summer, which is the third book. So it's Part of Your World and Yours Truly, then Just for the Summer. I feel like Yours Truly is probably the most popular of the three, but I think I like this one more than Yours Truly. Yours Truly, although it's still 5 stars, it's probably my least favorite of the three. This one again walks that fine balance between, you know, keeping the book fluffy and romance heavy while also having a real discussion on trauma and PTSD. This one, definitely check out the warnings, the trigger warnings, because I think this one has parental abuse PTSD. So if the topics are too heavy for you, then don't read the book. But if you are open to reading these books, I feel like Abby Jimenez does such a fine job in weaving those things in and having that real discussion about them. And I also want to mention that the male main characters for these books are just like, we need more men like them in our lives, is all I'm gonna say. Category 3 is new release you haven't read yet but want to. That would be the Powerless trilogy. I believe that the novella and the second book are already out, and they both were released this year. So it was Powerless, then Powerful is the novella, and then Reckless is the second book. So I'm looking forward to reading those. Don't have any opinions to share at the moment. Those books are by Lauren Roberts. They're like a romantasy YA. The girl is ordinary, but she is in a society where everybody who doesn't have magic powers is persecuted, and of course she falls in love with the guy who assists the king in persecuting these ordinary people. So I feel like it'll be a typical easy romantasy read. I'm hoping I like the male main lead, but I don't know, so we'll see. The next one is A Sorceress Comes to Call by Kingfisher. I think that one just got released like a day ago or so, so it counts here, but I believe that it's going to be my Owl Crate August book. So when that comes in, I'm really excited to read that one. I think I'm going to be buddy reading that with a good friend of mine, and I already have the audiobook like on hold with Libby. So hopefully that comes in soon so I can do a immersion read for that one. I'm a little scared about the horror aspect, but I've heard that it's more like the fairy tale dark horror and not like thriller horror, so I feel like I should be able to handle that. Other than that, there's not too many books that were released this year that are a main priority for me to read. I've actually been very good about reading my high priority new releases and getting those books in quickly on my Libby app, so not too many on this list, which is good, and I intend to keep it this way. Category 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. The first one was originally indie release, but it's now being traditionally published, and that is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. This book was the best book of 2023 for books with Emily Fox, so I really need to get on this one as soon as that traditionally published edition comes out. So this one has a woman who goes into a school that is male only. So she's the first woman, so I'm anticipating a lot of prejudice and sexism and her fighting against that. So that's interesting. Another one is Wisteria by Adalyn Grace. That one is a YA romantasy. I loved Belladonna, and it's like a gothic, it's like a gothic YA romantasy. Foxglove I also had a lot of fun with. I know some people didn't love it too much. I personally really did have a lot of fun with it, so I am looking forward to the third and final book, which should be releasing at the end of this month. Category 5 is biggest disappointment. So I have a few books for this category, so I'm going to try to go as fast as possible. The first one is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. So my relationship with ACOTAR is a little bit toxic. When I read it, I am very addicted to it, but there's a lot of parts of it that kind of frustrates me or even angers me sometimes. A Court of Silver Flames angered me and frustrated me more than it hooked me in. So this brick of a book, I think it's like 800 plus pages, is just so repetitive to me. I know for some people, Nesta's character development and her healing from a lot of trauma and just she's dealing with a lot of mental health issues. For some people, like, her growth really spoke to them. For other people who have also dealt with certain things that she's dealt with, it felt like an abysmal representation of that kind of character development. Like, for example, for me personally, I felt like the way that people forced her to heal wouldn't have worked for me. Like, it did not work for me. So those were very frustrating for me to read because I'm like, that's not how this works from my personal experience. So I feel like SJM could have done something a little bit different and maybe, consulted some experts to make her development a little bit more, like, instead of being like, okay, this is just one way to heal, like, be a little bit more like Abby Jimenez and do it in a way that more people who have dealt with mental health issues could feel for Nesta, And also, I feel like this book could have been summarized in 3 sentences where it's like, she wakes up and she goes to train, and then she goes to the library and works out. Oh, actually 4 sentences, because then she goes and walks up and down the stairs of the House of Wind as if that's supposed to be healing, which I strongly disagree with. And then, at night, she is turned on by how hot Cassian is, and, there's a lot of smut. So I was starting to skip entire chunks and just getting really frustrated because I felt like it was focusing on things I disagreed with, or I felt like they shouldn't be focusing on that thing and should be focusing on another thing. Also, I wanted to mention that it pisses me off that Rhysand doesn't get character assassinated by the readers here, when what he does in this book, in my opinion, is far worse than what Tamlin did after book 1. So, like, I just don't understand how women, after reading this book, can still love Rhysand. Like, to me, he is unsalvageable, he's irredeemable, like, he's so dead to me. And it's not just because this is from Nessa's POV. Like, if I were Feyre, I'd be done too. I mean, I guess I can't because I've made this pledge and he's my mate and all this stuff. So I guess as Feyre I can't, but like objectively, no, I still can because his parents didn't like each other. So like, yeah, no, done with Rhysand. Anyways, another book that sorely disappointed me was From Blood and Ash. I almost wish I could get my money back because I paid for the ebook and the audiobook for this, and I very much regret it. But if I remember correctly, it's first person point of view for Poppy. And what frustrated me is when you do first person point of view, I need to understand everything that she's doing from her perspective. And also if she doesn't understand something and I don't understand, it's okay because we're both on the same page. But for the majority of this book, I felt like she understood what was going on, but I as the reader was still going, what, where, why, how, like, what are you doing? Like the world building was just incredibly lacking and confusing. And then her decisions also very questionable many times. And then the one part near the end that completely dug its grave for this book was when she started fighting the male main lead because he's done something that made her incredibly distraught, angry. She saw red, she was out for blood, and it made sense. Actually, that part made sense for her to want to kill him. But yet, while they're fighting, she's so turned on at the same time that she just ends up sleeping with him out in the snow when she's supposed to kill him. Like, I was like, no one is hot enough. Nobody is hot enough for you to do that. Like, gross. So I did end up finishing the book because after that there was such a little sliver left to read, but the ending was also terrible and very toxic. So yeah, definitely not continuing that series. Wish I didn't spend that money, but you know, you win some, you lose some. A recent release that was such a disappointment for me and I really wanted to like it was When a Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I feel like so many romantasy readers, booktubers, book talkers are absolutely raving about this book. And the cover is so gorgeous, which I know is very superficial, but like it's so pretty. And I could not like this book. I DNF'd it about 20% in. Like, the story just felt very lyrical in a way that I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't make it make sense. You know, even 1/5 of the way into the book, I was like, what is going on? What are you doing? Who are you? Who are they? What is this world? Like, utterly confused, and I felt like things just kept jumping back and forth, and I was like, oh wait, so we're not in the same setting that we were in like 2 paragraphs ago? Okay, so where are we? And it was just extremely frustrating, and it's like really, really big. This book is humongous and you can hurt someone with it. So I just cut my losses. I DNF'd it, which is really sad because I really did want to like it. But yeah, I tried the book, I tried the audiobook, and both were awful. So there's that. Another recent release that was disappointing was A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. I love her Bridge Kingdom series. I feel like that's a really well done romantasy series, and I can't wait for the last, I think, 5th and 6th book to come out. But they are getting traditionally published now, so, you know, I don't love the new cover, but that's neither here nor there. For A Fate Inked in Blood, I was so excited for this one. It's supposed to be a romantasy, Norse inspired. I can't speak to Norse inspired because other than the names, like, I'm not well versed in Norse mythology. So I just felt like Danielle L. Jensen was given a list of tropes that she had to hit and had to just stuff them all into this story. And it just got so choppy and all over the place, and the characters made no sense. I think the main female character's name is Freya, and I was like, Freya, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Like, come on, like, why didn't you come up with this? Like, hello, like, why don't you think this way? Like, why don't you think, oh, maybe I can control my own fate? Why do you have to keep thinking someone else has to control your own fate? And also, like, the twist at the end felt very obvious to me, and the male main character was kind of bland to me. A lot of things were just like, okay, you could have cut that entire scene out because, you know, the whole point of separating with the main group was to get to this destination faster. And yet, like, I feel like they got to the same destination, you know, 15 minutes after you got there. So what was the point of risking your life for that? So all these different things. And then I actually have two romance novels I want to mention because Abby Jimenez, I feel like in this video I've hyped up so much, but I want to talk about the first two books that she's ever published, which are The Friend Zone, yes, The Friend Zone and The Happy Ever After Playlist. They're still popular books. I think that they're well written books. I just couldn't get behind these romances, and I feel like with contemporary romance especially, if you can't root for the main characters, then you can't like the book. It's hard to like the book if the two people who are supposed to have the happily ever after are two people you don't root for. With The Friend Zone, I felt like there was a lot of emotional cheating involved, and then she kind of forced that person to end up being a bad person to kind of justify the emotional cheating, but I'm just not down with that, so didn't like that one. And then The Happy Ever After Playlist, I did not like the male romantic interest. It's been a while since I read this book, but if I remember correctly, I felt like the main male character was a bit overbearing and a bit controlling, and I don't like that. Those two I didn't like, but everything that she's come out with after that, including Life's Too Short, which is supposed to be part of that trilogy, it's the last one, like I've absolutely loved that one and all the future ones. So I feel like she's improved so much, and so I'm still gonna read everything she comes out with. Category 6 is Biggest Surprise. The first one I want to talk about is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. First of all, look how gorgeous this regular trade edition is. There's no dust jacket. It's printed onto the hardcover itself, which I absolutely love, and I feel like more people need to do this. This is a Holmes Watson style fantasy murder mystery. So if you like Sherlock Holmes and you like that dynamic, you know, where he's really quirky and really funny and eccentric, but an absolute genius, and then you have the Watson style character who's a little bit clumsy, but you know, they just make the perfect duo, then I think you should try this out. The world that is built here doesn't need like super big world building, but it's enough, and so it's definitely fantasy, but it's got a bit of mystery thriller vibes to it as well, because you know, they're investigating a crime where for some reason these like branches are just, you know, growing out of these people, and obviously it's killing them, and it's very grotesque. I didn't know if I was going to be able to handle it, but because I think they keep those graphic scenes short, and you have a lot of that, you know, dark comedy quirkiness to it, it worked for me, and it was so much fun, and it didn't trigger any panic attacks or anxiety, which is a main concern for me when I read these kinds of things. So I love this. I can't wait for the second book. I love Anna and I love Din, who are like the Watson Holmes characters, well, Holmes Watson characters. So yeah, love this. Another huge surprise for me was The Sins on Their Bones by Laura R. Samatin. I ended up actually meeting this author when she had a conversation with S.T. Gibson, and I got this Owl Crate edition personally signed by her. So even though Owl Crate has all the you know, autographed signed pages, she also went ahead and signed the title page for me, so this makes this book extra special. This book is like Russian Jewish inspired. It is a fantasy, and I don't know too much about Judaism, so I can't speak too much to it, but it's a dark romantasy, so I wouldn't classify it as like the typical romantasy that we've been reading. This thing is very, very dark. I mean, one of the main point of views, so there's three perspectives. There's the dethroned king, the current king, which is his ex-husband, and the dethroned king's spy master, who is now his lover. I guess the usurper, the ex-husband, or I don't know if they've divorced, but anyways, that guy is awful and twisted, and you still get his perspective, and he's an abuser. The former czar, so his husband, was a victim of domestic violence. Like, it was physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. Like, he was violent to his husband, and his husband was the czar. So you can just imagine, like, if the czar can be abused, anybody could be abused. But it includes him as a point of view, so it's kind of crazy to see how he justifies his actions. So it's very, very dark, but it's so good. If you're okay with darker content and you're looking for something that's really well written and still a romantasy, highly, highly recommend this one. A romance that really surprised me was actually a YA romance, and that is a pho love story by Lone Le. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but this one really surprised me because I was like, oh, it's YA, you know, whatever. But I had asked my friend to recommend one romance book for me to read, and I would read it, and that's the one she recommended me. So I wouldn't have picked it up if not for her, so I'm very thankful that she did. Like, this book needed to be YA. It needed to be with protagonists that were, you know, seniors in high school about to go into college, like that huge, you know, chapter in our lives. It was the perfect placement for that. If you have immigrant parents like I do, specifically Asian immigrant parents, as a first generation Asian American, even though my parents didn't run like their own restaurant, it still hits. Like, the things that these protagonists, these kids go through, like, if you didn't go through that, you know somebody who went through that, and it just absolutely tugs at your heart. You know, you have that struggle where they've sacrificed so much to have a better life, to provide a better life for you, and you don't want to, you know, you don't want to be like unappreciative, but you also feel like you're not being heard. You know, the main female character wants to pursue the arts, and they're just like they're not even open to discussion about that. The stakes just felt so realistic and so real. If you have immigrant parents, especially Asian immigrant parents, I feel like you have to read this book. Like, it's kind of like Disney's movie Turning Red, where, you know, you just feel seen after watching that movie. So I just felt seen after reading this book. And of course, after reading this book, I was craving pho so bad. But yeah, a pho love story, highly recommend. Such a big, pleasant surprise for me. And the last big surprise that I have is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. Oh, I actually have this book. Hold on. All right, I'm back. I totally forgot I had the actual copy of this book. So I wasn't planning to read this book. Basically, I wanted to get a bunch of books that had themes to it that my brother's now fiance really enjoys, and she loves baking. I didn't end up doing that for her for Christmas, but this was one of the books I had initially tried for that intent, and I absolutely loved it. I don't know if this is YA or middle grade. It's gotten awards for both. I would say it's more middle grade / like ageless, which there's a YouTuber who used that term, Easy Cat, I think. But it's ageless. Like, I feel like it's good for preteens. I feel like it's good for adults. It is a coming of age book where you have this girl who can only do the little magics, right? So she's like, I can't change the world with the little magic that I have. All I can do is manipulate bread. And she ends up making a huge impact. So I feel like it was really fun and quirky. I loved the sourdough activator. That was one of my favorite characters. But, you know, I feel like it's a good lesson on, you know, even if you think that what your strengths are might be small, you can still do big things with it if you wanted to. So this was my first and only T. Kingfisher book that I've read so far. It's part of the reason why I want to read A Sorceress Comes to Call, because I just loved her writing here. If you're looking for something quick and fun and easy, and as an adult, you know, you don't have to think too much, this is definitely one to recommend. If you are looking for a book for a preteen or someone who's really quite advanced in reading, even in elementary school should be fine, then, you know, have them try this one out. You know, there's no romance or anything in it, so. All right, I've been talking for a while now and my throat's starting to feel really dry. I'm gonna take a little break and I'm going to film part 2 afterwards, but this way I feel like I can at least get this chunk out. If you've read any of the books that I've mentioned so far, please give me your thoughts and opinions down below. If not, then maybe leave like a sword emoji down below for 5 broken blades. I cannot wait to see you guys in part 2. I'll see you soon.